Hi, I'm Chef Steve. Welcome to the Care Kitchen, where we cook with kindness. This program is brought to you by ComForCare and At Your Side. And ComForCare and At Your Side provides personal care for people throughout the United States and Canada. I'm Steve Toll here with our program, Care Kitchen, every Thursday at 1 p.m. Eastern, bringing you some great recipes from the Care Kitchen cookbook, as well as just having some fun and experimenting around using the recipes and ideas as a springboard and getting to know the person we're cooking for, getting to know those people we're caring for, and also through the process getting to know ourselves and what we like and how we can modify our diets and come up with great plans to stay healthy, enjoy food, and also enjoy the act of cooking. Really make it a great activity, because it's lots of fun to share. Always triggers great memories. Everybody has stories associated with a great meal, people they were with, some great recipe that they've always wanted to learn. So there's lots and lots to talk about. Well, today we're featuring some discussion of talks about dishes from the 50s and 60s. And I grew up in that era, and growing up as a kid in Philadelphia, we had certain things we looked forward to, staple things that were part of the region and also part of my background. So for me, the traditional foods tended to be more around Jewish holidays. Things like roast brisket, kasha varnishkas, buckwheat groats, gefilte fish. Those were the traditional things that I knew associated with my background. But then also, there were all the things that I grew up with, which were just general American things. Hot dogs, meatloaf, baked chicken, fried chicken, all these kinds of sort of staple American foods. So, when you get to know someone in your care, you realize that ethnic background and various dishes that they grew up on need to be expressed in some way so we can come up with modifications. And that's something going forward that we're going to be talking about a lot in the Care Kitchen. How can we take some of these great recipes that people love and modify them in such a way so that even as they age and they have certain issues around eating or nutrition, that we can make them still have something that they really enjoy and like. It's going to be changed a little bit, but probably not enough to where they won't enjoy it. So that's what we're always going to be talking to. So let's get to our recipe today. We're going to be doing a sloppy Joe. And I remember growing up with it, great sandwich, and I always looked forward to it. And it was also a great way, my mother would always talk about using up little pieces of this and that when she made it. So if there were some onions, some peppers, things, she would throw it in there with the ground beef. And ketchup and mustard was basically the flavorings, and salt and pepper. Put it on a nice bun, serve it with some chips or fries or a pickle, and you've got a great, great meal. So we're going to get started with the recipe now, making the sloppy Joe. Then we're going to come back, plate it up, give it a taste, and take a look at what we've got. Okay, let's get cooking. Okay, so let's get started with our recipe now. We're going to make the sloppy Joe from the Care Kitchen cookbook. And there's a couple of different techniques in there. One is a quick sloppy Joe, which just uses sloppy Joe sauce and meat, and it's a real fast thing to put together. Certainly you can use that. And then the other preparation, which is also included, is doing it more from scratch. And that's what we're going to do today, and use up some ingredients. Both will work. If you're in a time crunch, you can do the fast one. This doesn't take that long, and it also gives you the opportunity to use some more fresh ingredients. So we're going to get started with that. Classic sloppy Joe, one of the favorites from the 50s and 60s. I know I grew up on this one, and lots of people did, and it's a fun sandwich and a fun dish, and it's a real popular one. So I'm going to start out by putting a little olive oil in my pan. Let's get our pan on. So one of the things that we can do, and traditionally when we do something like a sloppy Joe, we're using ground meat. In this case, we're using ground beef. The typical thing in many recipes is to cook the beef in the pan and then drain it. Now, one thing that I found is depending on the meat you use, many times you don't have to do that draining process. Now, if it's particularly fatty meat or someone really needs to watch their fat content, then by all means you can drain it. But a little bit of the fat in there actually gives it more flavor and binds with some of the other ingredients. So in that particular case, rather than cooking the meat first, I am going to cook the onions and peppers, and then I'm going to put the meat in to blend in with all these great flavors. So I'm just bringing this pan up to heat a little bit, and the recipe calls basically the sauce is mustard and ketchup, basically cooked in there, and that's a sloppy Joe with ground meat, typically served on a bun. I've got an onion roll I'm going to serve it on today, and I'm going to serve it with some nice dill pickles and chips. So it makes a very nice lunch. And also, the sloppy Joe could be used on rice. You could put it on noodles. I mean, you can really do anything you want with this particular dish. Okay, so our pan is starting to get hot now. We're going to throw our onions. I had some assorted onions left, red onions and green onions. Throw those in. I had some assorted peppers left as well, so I throw those in there. And we're going to let those saute up a little bit. And we're going to put in a minute, we'll just toss this around. I like to use a rubber spatula on this because this is a non-stick pan and it really works well. And if I don't gouge it out with metal too much, it probably will last me for a while. So we're going to just let this cook a little bit. And our next ingredient is going to be our garlic powder. And I'm going to throw that in there. Get our garlic powder in there. Okay. And let's put in some salt. And of course a little pepper, perk up the flavor. Okay. So we'll mix that around a little bit. Now the next thing we're going to put in, these are starting to soften up and smell good, starting to cook. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to put our ground beef in. So I've got a pound of ground beef here. And this meat is 80-20 ground beef. Now what that means is that it's 20% fat. That would be considered not completely lean, but not the most fatty meat you can get. 70-30 has more fat. 90-10 tends to be the leanest that you can get. So depending on who you're cooking for or yourself, how that amount of fat is either not a bother for you or you can do it. I mean, it does add a lot of flavor, and keep in mind that the portion sizes are not that big. So it's not that we're taking in a lot of something that's not healthy. Red meat really is an essential part of a diet for meat eaters. I mean, obviously, if you're vegan or vegetarian and that doesn't appeal, there are other ways to get the nutrients, but there's very important amino acids and all sorts of nutrients and having red meat, especially for women as they age. There's been studies saying that it's important to have some. But again, in the area of food and nutrition, and what's right for one is not necessarily right for the other. Everybody is different. And that's why it's so important to customize and personalize and get to know that person who you're cooking for. Okay, so we're just going to let this cook up a little bit. And while we're talking, let that cook. Because, something like red meat has become quite almost a delicacy today. It tends to be one of the most expensive proteins. And so from that standpoint, we want to make sure that we maximize the use and that, that people are able to enjoy it and get the nutrients out of it that they need. And when it comes to buying beef, it can be a little confusing. You can go to the grocery store, you want some ground beef. So you have to look at the fat ratio, as I said, 90-10, 80-20, 73-30, the different cut of meat. So typically, an 80-20 meat is a good meat to use for a burger. It's a good meat to use for a meatloaf. If someone really needs to watch fat, then you can go to a 90-10. The extra fat, gives it more flavor, but it's a trade-off. So, and again, if you keep a portion size normal, it's very healthy protein to eat. And let's face it, people love it. Okay, so we're starting to get a little activity here as our meat is browning up. I'll tell you, this dish, I remember this as a kid in school. And anytime the cafeteria had a sloppy Joe, I was right there in line because I just loved the sloppy Joe sandwich. It just seems like one of those real, American standbys. Now, we're talking about something like that. And for me, kid growing up in Philadelphia, American kid during the 50s and 60s, eating these sort of traditional things. But, many people in this country, it's such a fascinating country of many different ethnic groups, have many other things they grew up with. And, I'm going to talk a little bit about that because classic dishes from the 50s and 60s for me tend to be a little different than classic dishes from the 50s and 60s for someone from another country. I was speaking to someone the other day who is from India, and she was telling me that many of the older adults struggle with trying to get used to some of the American food. So, she was saying that, in many cases we can cook some of those depending on as we get to know the person in our care and we understand their background. Maybe we can come up with some ideas and modify some of those traditional recipes from different countries, and we'll come up with different ideas that our clients and loved ones and ourselves are going to enjoy. So here we are talking through this. It's pretty much there. There's a little extra liquid in there, basically water that comes out of the meat, because of course there's water content in every ingredient. So in order to get the most flavor, we want to let that water kind of evaporate off a little bit so that when we put our sauces and things on, our next ingredients, so that it will not dilute the flavor and we'll get that full flavor that we're looking for. Okay. Looking good. I like the little color of those peppers in there too. It adds a little dimension of fun. Getting down to where most of that liquid is gone. So now, next thing we can do is we can add our next ingredients, which is some mustard, a little bit of mustard, and of course the great ingredient of ketchup, which is a real great universal ingredient in many, many dishes. I'm going to put that in there and mix it up and see what we have. Check our flavors, make everything blend. And I think we're going to need this look here, a little more ketchup. This pound of beef, and according to the recipe, calls for about a half a cup of ketchup. And you'll see that in the recipe in the Care Kitchen cookbook for this process, this particular type of sloppy joe. We're getting the color we're looking for, and it's looking mighty good. Looking mighty good. Okay. Well, we're almost there. We're going to let that cook just a little bit more and kind of get a little bit more of that sauces and everything blended. And that's the whole idea. It's getting everything blended. And then at the end, we're going to check for making sure our seasonings are okay. We have enough salt, have enough garlic powder, and that kind of thing. So let me get a tasting spoon here. See what we got. Well, it's very good. Got a nice sweetness to it. I think we could just use a little bit more of the mustard. And again, you know, these kinds of things, you got to do it to taste, because everybody has a different taste, and honestly, every one of these recipes is different. So adjusting at the end becomes a very important part of really making sure the food tastes right and what you want it to be. And put a little more salt in there to perk it up a little bit. And again, on salt, you can always use salt substitutes if the person you're cooking for has to be on a low sodium diet. There we go. Starting to shine and glisten. See how that just changes the look as we cook and all the flavors come out and blend. It really looks good. Okay. Well, let's give it one more little taste. That came out great. Well, I'm going to turn off my heat now, and we're almost ready to get this plated. It turned out nice. And, you know, speaking of ground beef, this is a standard ground beef. Of course, you know, there's farm-raised beef. There's all kinds of different high-end beef, and of course, other meats you could use. Pork, chicken, turkey, veal, lamb, whatever you'd like. So let's get this going. Now we're going to give it a final taste and plating, and give it a try and see what it looks like. Okay, so we've got our sloppy joe here. We just finished it up, and they bring this pan over, nice and hot, ready to go. And it looks wonderful. Very, very juicy and tasty. We tasted it already, so I know it's good. Okay, so I've got a plate here with an onion roll. So now you can use any type of a roll for this. Typically a burger roll would be what would be used, but hamburger roll works just fine. And I had an onion roll, which I like, so I'm going to use that today. So basically, all this is topping this roll with our sloppy Joe, put the top on, and then I'm going to serve it with some pickles and chips. And basically, it's as simple as that. Now, here's our sloppy Joe. And we'll just take it and spoon it nicely on there. Look how good that looks. Shiny and tasty. Let's give a little bit more. And so that's about a nice portion. And you can see you got plenty left over. And you can, as I said, this is one way to serve it, but you can also serve it with rice. You could also serve it on noodles. It makes a delicious filling for anything. Okay, and then I like to serve it sort of just a little cocked off to the side. And we've got a nice pickle here, which we'll just cut up a little bit here and put a couple pickle pieces on there. And then we've got some potato chips here, which I think go well with it. So it makes a very simple, quick meal. And with the pound of meat that I made, I have approximately enough for 3 to 4 nice servings. Okay, so we've got some chips on there with it. And that looks pretty darn nice to me. So that is a sloppy Joe with pickles and chips. And you can see how nice that is. Hearty, delicious meal. This is a classic 50s and 60s sandwich, and it was always so popular. I know I loved it. I'm sure that many people are used to this. And these kinds of things, as you prepare these foods, these are reminiscence tools, really. I mean, you come up with a conversation, come up with a dish, you can almost always spark a great conversation talking about learning about someone's past, learning about what their likes are, what they grew up, what kind of a life did they have, and all of those indicators help us to provide better care for someone. The better we know someone, the more that we can be in tune with them. Bond is created, it's better. So I encourage you, Care Kitchen is all about cooking with kindness, and it's all about finding those connections through cooking, using cooking. We all have to eat, and cooking is a great activity to bind us together, to create that cohesion, that unity, and have a lot of fun at the end of the day because it's very enjoyable. And we're taking care of ourselves with some very healthy, good nutritional foods. Well, this has been great today. I'm just going to give myself a little taste of this final dish here. And so I don't pick it up and slobber it all over myself, I think I'm just going to take a little bite on the roll and see what we've got. That is delicious. The beauty of a sloppy Joe, because of the flavoring, it's a little sweet and sour. It has that real sort of, for lack of a better word, like wholesome, homespun kind of flavor. Very reminiscent of stuff that people grew up on. And that's what we're after, to really have some fun with it. Well, I thank you again for joining me here in the Care Kitchen. Remember to cook with kindness. I'm here every Thursday at 1 p.m. And please do visit the ComForCare website where you can download lots of information and recipes under the senior nutrition section. And I look forward to seeing you every Thursday at 1 p.m. I'm here. Please feel free to comment, question, anything that you'd like to see, any recipes I'm not covering, let me know. And maybe we can do them, and like to hear your successes with food. Thanks again. Have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you next time.